You ever have those moments where you're talking with friends, reminiscing about games, and suddenly someone mentions a title that you'd completely forgotten about? Like, how did I ever forget that game? Well, today's video is all about those hidden gems, the legendary games that, for whatever reason, slipped under the radar over the years. Maybe they were overshadowed by bigger releases or just didn't get the love they deserved. So, let's take a trip down memory lane and rediscover 15 incredible games that you might have totally forgotten even existed. Heavenly Sword. Heavenly Sword was one of those early PS3 games that felt like a glimpse into the future of gaming. Released back in 2007, it delivered a cinematic experience way ahead of its time, and for those who played it, it left a mark. You play as Nariko, a fierce warrior wielding the Heavenly Sword, a mystical weapon that's both a blessing and a curse. The game's visuals were jaw-dropping back then, with character animations and facial expressions that were incredibly lifelike, setting a new standard for storytelling in games. The combat was a blast fast, fluid, and dynamic. You could switch between different stances mid-battle, each offering a unique style that made every fight feel intense. The game had this epic, almost mythological vibe with larger-than-life battles and a powerful story about destiny, sacrifice, and revenge. And Nariko? She was a total badass, a character that brought a raw intensity to every scene. It's a shame Heavenly Sword didn't get more love over the years, because it was a truly special experience. The game came out at a time when people were still figuring out what the PS3 could do, and it pushed boundaries in a way that's still memorable today. For those who played it, Heavenly Sword isn't just a game, it's one of those legendary experiences you can't quite forget, even if it's faded into gaming history. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning is one of those games that deserves so much more attention than it got. Released in 2012, it combined rich RPG mechanics with fast, fluid combat that made it feel more like an action game than the usual grind-heavy RPGs of its time. You play as the fateless one someone brought back from the dead with no destiny, a total blank slate, which opens up a world of possibilities for how you shape your character and your story. What really sets Kingdoms of Amalur apart is its world. Crafted with the creative talents of fantasy writer R.A. Saboteur and comic book legend Todd McFarlane, the game's universe is packed with lore, vibrant landscapes, and tons of quests that give it that epic adventure vibe. And the combat? Unreal. It's dynamic and satisfying with a huge range of skills and abilities that let you play exactly how you want, whether you're swinging giant hammers, casting powerful spells, or darting around with daggers. Despite having all the pieces of a legendary RPG, Kingdoms of Amalur somehow slipped under the radar, and it's honestly a tragedy that more people haven't experienced it. For anyone who loves an immersive fantasy world with addictive combat, this is one forgotten gem worth revisiting. BulletStorm. BulletStorm is an absolute blast of game that ditches all pretenses and just leans into pure, chaotic fun. Released in 2011, this game stood out for its kill with skill system, where you're not just taking down enemies, you're racking up style points for doing it in the most creative, over-the-top ways possible. It's brutal, it's ridiculous, and it's designed to make you feel like an action hero with zero limits. The story is straightforward. You're Grayson Hunt, a grizzled space pirate with a vendetta against his old commander. But the plot is really just an excuse to throw you into one insane combat scenario after another. You've got a leash that lets you pull enemies into all kinds of environmental hazards, from electrified wires to cacti, and every kill feels like a mini challenge to see how creatively you can pull it off. The humor is crude, the dialogue is loud and unapologetic, and it just keeps pushing the boundaries of ridiculousness in all the right ways. BulletStorm didn't get the mainstream love it deserved, but it's the kind of game that sticks with you if you played it. It's not trying to be deep or emotional, it's just pure, unfiltered fun. For anyone who wants a shooter that doesn't take itself seriously and gives you endless ways to wreak havoc, BulletStorm is one of those legendary games that's just too good to stay forgotten. Freedom Fighters. Freedom Fighters is one of those early 2000s gems that felt way ahead of its time. Released in 2003, this third-person shooter threw players into an alternate history New York, where Soviet forces have taken over, and you're leading the guerrilla resistance to take back the city. You play as Chris Stone, a plumber-turned-rebel leader, and the game captures that gritty underdog vibe perfectly. It's all about rallying your fellow citizens and building up a ragtag team to fight back against a massive occupying force. What made Freedom Fighters unique was its squad-based mechanics. You could recruit allies, command them in battle, and strategically plan assaults on enemy positions. For a game of its time, it gave you a surprising amount of freedom in how you tackled each mission, whether you were going in guns blazing or coordinating attacks with your squad. There was a real sense of progression too, as you earned charisma points by completing objectives, which allowed you to recruit more fighters and grow your influence across the city. The game's atmosphere, with its patriotic soundtrack and dystopian vibe, made it feel like you were part of a gritty action movie. It didn't shy away from showing the rough, desperate side of a resistance movement, which added to its immersive feel. Freedom Fighters may not have gotten the sequels or attention it deserved, but for those who played it, it's a legendary experience that's tough to forget. It's a classic that nailed that mix of strategy, action, and rebellion in a way that still holds up. Alpha Protocol. Alpha Protocol is one of those cult classics that just slipped through the cracks but left a lasting impression on those who gave it a shot. Released in 2010, it's an espionage RPG where you play as Michael Thornton, a rogue agent navigating a web of intrigue, betrayal, and political conspiracies. The game combines choice-driven storytelling with RPG mechanics and spy action, creating an experience that feels like a mix between Mass Effect and James Bond. What sets Alpha Protocol apart is its branching storyline and the sheer impact your choices have on the narrative. Every decision, every dialogue option you choose affects how the story unfolds and how other characters perceive you. It's a game that makes you feel like a real spy, where building alliances, making enemies, and even choosing how aggressively you act have real consequences. This leads to an experience where no two playthroughs are quite the same. Each path can reveal different aspects of the story, depending on your approach.
Hey, yeah, and considering that item post.
Sure, Alpha Protocol had its rough edges and it wasn't exactly polished, but the ambition was undeniable and it carved out a place as a unique RPG experience that dared to be different. For those who can appreciate a game with deep choices and a spy thriller vibe, Alpha Protocol is a forgotten gem that deserves a second look. It's one of those games that stays with you, flaws and all, simply because it tried something bold. Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil is one of those unforgettable games that flew under the radar but built a devoted fan base. Released in 2003, this action-adventure game threw players into the role of Jade, a photojournalist in a dystopian world where government conspiracies and alien threats are just the beginning. Armed with her camera, a staff, and a fierce determination to uncover the truth, Jade feels like a refreshingly unique protagonist, compassionate yet tough, and genuinely invested in fighting for justice. What made Beyond Good and Evil stand out was its blend of gameplay styles. You're exploring vibrant, mysterious cities, uncovering clues, solving puzzles, sneaking past guards, and occasionally diving into some surprisingly intense combat. Plus, the game lets you use your camera to document evidence of the government's corruption, giving it a different kind of purpose than just being a weapon. It's an adventure that feels personal, like you're fighting for something that actually matters, not just the typical hero's journey. And the world itself is something special. The art style is vibrant, almost whimsical, but the story has this serious edge that makes every new discovery feel weighty. You're not just exploring, you're part of a resistance, digging into secrets that the government is desperate to keep hidden. Beyond Good and Evil didn't get the recognition it deserved at launch, but those who played it know it's a true classic. It's a game with heart, purpose, and a unique vision that still feels fresh, even years later. It's one of those legendary titles that's easy to remember, even if it didn't get the mainstream love it should have.
No matter what happens, good luck, Jade.
Blur. Blur was a racing game with a twist and adrenaline-packed blend of street racing and explosive power-ups that made it feel like Mario Kart for grown-ups. It released in 2010, it took the familiar street racing formula and injected it with a dose of arcade chaos, where you weren't just aiming for first place but also fending off a storm of attacks from other drivers. It was fast, flashy, and had this gritty, realistic edge to its style that set it apart from other racers. The power-ups in Blur were what really made it memorable. You could pick up items like mines, nitro boosts, and even shockwaves to blast opponents off the road, making every race feel like an unpredictable battle. There's a thrill in finding that perfect balance between speed and strategy, knowing when to attack, when to defend, and when to unleash everything to steal first place. And the multiplayer? Absolute mayhem. It's one of those games where you'd be shouting at the screen, especially when a friend hit you with a perfectly timed shock right before the finish line. Despite its innovation and addictive gameplay, Blur kind of faded into obscurity. It came out at a time when the racing genre was crowded, and sadly, it didn't get the attention it deserved. But for those who remember it, Blur was a legendary experience, a game that dared to mix realistic racing with chaotic power-ups and pulled it off with style. If you ever played it, you know it's one of those unique gems that's hard to forget. Enslaved Odyssey to the west. Enslaved Odyssey to the west is one of those hidden gems that deserves way more love. Released in 2010, this game took inspiration from the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West, but flipped it into a post-apocalyptic future where nature and technology collide in stunning ways. You play as Monkey, a rugged, athletic warrior who finds himself bonded to a tech-savvy young woman named Trip. The catch: she's hacked a headband onto him that forces him to protect her, adding a unique dynamic where survival depends on teamwork, and whether he likes it or not, keeping her safe. What makes Enslaved unforgettable is its world and the bond between Monkey and Trip. The landscapes are beautifully overgrown and filled with crumbling remnants of human civilization, giving it this surreal mix of beauty and desolation. The banter and evolving relationship between these two characters feel natural and genuine, bringing an emotional depth that goes beyond the usual action game. Monkey may be gruff, but as you go through each level, the bond between him and Trip grows, and it's hard not to feel invested in their journey.
Do all the talking when we get there, okay?
Okay.
The combat and platforming are smooth and satisfying, but it's really the story and characters that make Enslaved stand out. It's a game that didn't get the spotlight it deserved, but for those who played it, it's a legendary experience, a unique, heartfelt adventure that's hard to forget. If you're into games that mix action with a bit of heart and originality, Enslaved is absolutely worth revisiting. The Saboteur. The Saboteur is one of those games that took a bold concept and ran with it, creating an experience that's hard to forget. Released in 2009, it threw players into Nazi-occupied Paris, but with a twist, this was a stylish open-world adventure where you play as Sean Devlin, an Irish race car driver turned resistance fighter. The game captures this noir-like vibe with its unique art style, showing Nazi-controlled areas in black and white until you liberate them, which brings color and life back to the streets. It's a visual approach that nails the oppressive atmosphere and gives a powerful sense of reward when you reclaim parts of the city. The gameplay combines stealth, sabotage, and all-out action, letting you tackle missions in different ways. You're blowing up enemy installations, sneaking through alleyways, and taking down Nazis in some of the most satisfying ways. There's something incredibly rewarding about scaling rooftops, planting explosives, and slipping away before the fireworks go off. And the setting, it's filled with smoky bars, cabarets, and those iconic Parisian rooftops, giving the whole game a romantic, dangerous vibe.
Oh, fucking deadly!
The Saboteur might not have received the attention it deserved, but it's a game with style, atmosphere, and a sense of purpose. It's like playing through a pulp resistance thriller full of memorable moments and a unique visual style that sets it apart from other open world games. For anyone who missed it, this is one forgotten gem that's worth revisiting. It's a legendary take on World War II that still feels fresh and exciting. Okami. Okami is pure magic, a game that feels like stepping into a painting that comes to life with every stroke of the brush. Originally released in 2006, it tells the story of Amateur Sue, a sun goddess in the form of a white wolf, on a mission to restore life and color to a cursed, desolate world. The game is inspired by Japanese folklore and mythology, and it's not just a feast for the eyes, it's a journey that feels timeless and beautiful, blending art and gameplay in a way few games even attempt. The most iconic feature of Okami is its celestial brush mechanic. You literally paint on the screen to manipulate the world, drawing circles to make the sun rise, slashes to cut down obstacles, or blossoms to bring life back to barren landscapes. This isn't just a gimmick, it's woven into every part of the game, making each interaction feel like an act of creation. The art style, inspired by traditional Japanese ink wash painting, is mesmerizing, with every scene looking like a living canvas. The story is equally enchanting. Okami combines adventure, mystery, and humor in a way that feels lighthearted yet deeply meaningful. It's a tale of rebirth, resilience, and the power of nature, and it's easy to get lost in its world. Despite the game's initial commercial struggles, Okami has become a beloved classic, a true legend for anyone who appreciates games as an art form. It's not just a game you play, it's one you experience, one that leaves a lasting impression long after the credits roll. For anyone who's never tried it, Okami is an unforgettable adventure that deserves to be revisited. Spec Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line is one of those games that sneaks up on you. At first glance, it seems like a typical military shooter, but once you dig in, it's anything but. Released in 2012, it takes you to a ruined, sand-ravaged Dubai, where you play as Captain Martin Walker leading a squad on a search and rescue mission. But this game doesn't just throw you into another heroic military campaign, it pulls you into a dark, twisted descent that makes you question everything. What makes Spec Ops: The Line legendary is how it flips the script on war games. As you move deeper into the story, it becomes clear that nothing is black and white. The game confronts you with brutal, heart-wrenching choices that push you and Walker down a path that feels more like a psychological thriller than an action game. It's raw, unfiltered, and doesn't shy away from showing the cost of war, not just on the battlefield, but on the human psyche.
Conrad's command team. I knew these men.
The visuals and setting drive this home. Dubai, buried under mountains of sand, feels hauntingly beautiful and desolate. As you progress, the environment reflects the emotional toll the journey takes on the characters, making it feel almost like a character itself. The game's most unforgettable moments leave you questioning your actions, choices, and even the role of the player in a war game. Spec Ops: The Line isn't just another shooter, it's a gut punch, a game that sticks with you because it isn't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. It's a haunting, unforgettable experience that challenges the very notion of heroism in war games. For anyone who's played it, it's hard to forget, and it's one of those rare gems that took storytelling in games to a whole new level. Remember Me. Remember Me is one of those unique games that took a bold concept and crafted something memorable, even if it flew under the radar. Released in 2013 by Dontnod, the same studio behind Life is Strange, it's set in a cyberpunk version of Paris, where memories have become a commodity, something people can buy, sell, and even alter. You play as Nilan, an elite memory hunter with the power to break into people's minds, steal their memories, and even change them. It's a fascinating, eerie setup that explores the boundaries of identity and the ethics of memory manipulation. The gameplay stands out for its memory remix sequences, where you dive into a person's mind and alter specific moments to change how they remember an event. These sections are like mini puzzles, where you play with details and see how drastically one change can alter someone's perception. It's a brilliant mechanic that makes the game feel fresh and cerebral, and it's honestly one of the most innovative ideas in gaming at the time.
Get off of me!
Remember Me also shines in its visuals and atmosphere. Neo Paris is this dark, rain-soaked city full of neon lights and high-tech gadgets, but there's a gritty, almost oppressive vibe to it that reflects the story's themes of control and surveillance. Combat is fluid and customizable, letting you create combos with different effects, which makes each fight feel personal and strategic. Though it didn't get mainstream recognition, Remember Me is a forgotten gem with a unique vision and a story that explores deep, thought-provoking themes. It's a game that sticks with you because it's not afraid to try something different, and for those who love sci-fi with a twist, it's a truly underrated experience worth revisiting. Prototype is the kind of game that lets you unleash total mayhem in the best way possible. Released in 2009, it puts you in the shoes of Alex Mercer, a man with a mysterious virus that grants him insane powers and a serious vendetta against those who wronged him. Set in a chaotic, infected New York City, Prototype is all about pure, unfiltered destruction and the freedom to wreak havoc in any way you choose. What makes Prototype legendary is its sense of power. You're not just another superpowered character, you're a walking biological weapon. Alex can shapeshift, turning his body into all sorts of lethal forms, from massive blades to armor to claws, and the game encourages you to experiment with every ability. The movement is smooth and addictive. You can leap up buildings, glide over streets, and dash through crowds with a speed and agility that make you feel unstoppable. The game's world is gritty and dark, filled with mutated monsters and military forces trying to hunt you down, which creates this wild, unpredictable battleground. You're constantly switching between hunter and hunted, using stealth or brute force as you see fit. The story dives into Alex's lost memories and quest for revenge, adding a layer of mystery that keeps you hooked as you unravel the truth behind the virus and his own origin. Prototype may not have gotten the same spotlight as other open-world games, but it's a unique, exhilarating experience that makes you feel like an absolute powerhouse. For anyone who loves a game that lets you go all out, Prototype is an unforgettable classic that deserves a second look. Bully. Bully is one of Rockstar's most unique and honestly underrated games. Released in 2006, it took a break from the usual crime-laden streets and dropped you into Bulworth Academy, a private school full of cliques, bullies, and mischief waiting around every corner. You play as Jimmy Hopkins, a rebellious kid with a rough attitude, trying to navigate the social jungle of high school, and as you'd expect from Rockstar, it's not just about attending classes, it's about taking down bullies, pranking teachers, and finding your place in the school's hierarchy. What makes Bully legendary is its mix of humor, chaos, and that classic Rockstar freedom in a setting that feels completely fresh. Instead of guns and gangsters, you're wielding slingshots and stink bombs, sneaking out after curfew, and trying to survive the social dynamics of teenage life. The game nails the feeling of being at a school where every clique, the nerds, the jocks, the preppies has its own identity, and you're constantly shifting alliances and making enemies. The world of Bulworth is packed with detail and personality, from classrooms where you take mini-games as classes to the different parts of town you can explore as you unlock new areas. There's a sense of nostalgia here, but with that Rockstar edge that keeps things hilarious, unpredictable, and at times surprisingly heartfelt. Jimmy might be rough around the edges, but his journey to bring some order to the madness of Bulworth has this scrappy charm. Bully didn't get the mainstream attention of Rockstar's other games, but for those who played it, it's an unforgettable experience that shows you don't need an open-world crime epic to make something truly legendary. It's one of those cult classics that fans still talk about, hoping for a sequel because it captured something unique that few games have even tried to replicate. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is a true classic, and it's easy to see why it's still loved so much. Released in 2003, it redefined what an action-adventure game could be with its smooth parkour, acrobatic combat, and of course the iconic time rewinding mechanic. You play as the prince who accidentally unleashes the sands of time, turning most of the kingdom into terrifying sand creatures. From there, it's a journey filled with puzzles, dangerous traps, and battles, all in an effort to undo the damage and make things right. The rewind mechanic was groundbreaking. Every time you missed a jump or got struck down in combat, you could rewind a few seconds to give yourself another shot. It made every move feel just a bit more daring, knowing you had the power to reverse your mistakes, but it also added a level of strategy you couldn't rely on it endlessly, so every use felt meaningful. The setting is magical, blending ancient Persian architecture with a mystical atmosphere that feels timeless. The level design is smart and keeps you on your toes, with sequences that mix platforming, combat, and puzzle solving seamlessly. And the prince himself, he's not your typical hero. His witty, sometimes arrogant personality adds charm, making him memorable and human. The Sands of Time is a game that still holds up today because of its originality, creativity, and heart. It's a legendary experience that set a standard for action-adventure games, making it an unforgettable part of gaming history. For anyone who missed it, this is one game that's well worth revisiting. Psychonauts. Psychonauts is one of those unforgettable games that feels like stepping into someone else's imagination. Released in 2005, it's a unique, quirky platformer where you play as Rasputin, a young psychic with dreams of joining the elite group known as the Psychonauts. Set in a summer camp for kids with psychic abilities, Psychonauts takes you on a bizarre journey through the minds of different characters, each one weirder and more creative than the last. It's surreal, it's funny, and it's loaded with that classic Tim Schafer charm. What makes Psychonauts legendary is its level design, where every level is actually a trip into someone's mind. Each mindscape is completely unique and reflects the personality, fears, and issues of that character. From a chaotic mental battlefield to a twisted suburbia filled with surveillance, every world you explore feels fresh, inventive, and loaded with personality. The writing and humor are spot on, balancing between laugh-out-loud moments and surprisingly deep themes about mental health and identity. The gameplay is classic platforming, but with psychic twists, you're levitating, setting things on fire with your mind, and even using telekinesis to solve puzzles and defeat enemies. It's a game that never feels stale, because every new level throws something unexpected at you, keeping you invested in Raz's journey. Despite not getting huge attention at release, Psychonauts has built a loyal fan base and is now recognized as one of the most unique and creative platformers ever made. It's a game with heart, humor, and originality that still holds up, making it a legendary experience that's impossible to forget. For anyone who loves games with personality and imagination, Psychonauts is a must-play. And there you have it, 15 absolute legends that deserve so much more spotlight than they got. It's crazy how some of these just faded into the background, despite how unique or just straight up fun they were. So if this list jogged your memory, let me know if any of these titles hit you with that, oh wow, I remember that moment. And hey, maybe it's time to dust off a few of these and give them another go. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hi.